Hello everyone and welcome back into my NBA playoffs discussion. I'm going to pick up right where I left off from my video this past weekend. My predictions that I made for all four series are holding up pretty well at this point. The one that's obviously already doomed is my Heat in 5 prediction. That is no longer possible as Philly came back and won Game 4, so that's now tied 2-2 with Game 5 tonight. Joel Embiid coming back in that series has changed everything, and we also recently got news that Kyle Lowry will be out for tonight's game. So that's huge news for Miami Heat fans, very bad news for Philly fans, maybe some good news. I'm really starting to think that the Sixers have gained momentum back and that we'll see them actually win this series because Miami has been so steady throughout this playoffs. Obviously, very convincing win over the Atlanta Hawks in the first series, but these last 2 games have been way different and the story has really flipped. Now, obviously, they're going back to Miami for the game tonight, so that is a huge factor. That's always a pretty tough crowd. But I think that for the most part, Philly has gained momentum back. And if they're able to win this Game 5 tonight, I truly think it's over. I think they go back to Philly for Game 6 and close it out. So that's going to be really interesting to follow the Philadelphia 76ers and the Miami Heat for the rest of that series. The game we really have to talk about, obviously, is the Milwaukee Bucks and the Boston Celtics from last night. This was an absolute thriller. I was able to watch the highlights this morning. I was actually asleep when the game was happening. I'm here in Italy right now, so I was able to watch the game on Saturday night, thankfully, but it was actually Saturday afternoon in the U.S., Saturday night for me. But a 1:30 a.m. tip-off was a little late for me, and I'm wanting to stay up for Game 5 rather than Game 4. I'm glad I didn't stay up for it because I would have been really, really disappointed as a Bucks fan. This was a game that the Bucks, I really feel like, should have won. Obviously, you know, going into the fourth quarter with a lead, you expect them at home to be able to close them out. Give the Boston Celtics a lot of credit for their resolve and being able to come back. A lot of solid performances across the board for Boston. Marcus Smart and Jaylen Brown both with 18 points, and a very efficient 18 points at that. And then obviously the story was Jason Tatum and Al Horford both dropping 30 points. The Bucks just didn't have any other big-time performers besides Giannis. And, you know, Brook Lopez with a pretty decent night, Wes Matthews with some timely threes, Pat Connaughton was pretty good off the bench, but Drew Holiday, an absolutely awful performance, even though he did put up a decent amount of points. 5 of 22 from the field. Just not good for Drew and very uncharacteristic. I mean, looking back to last year's playoffs, we really saw him kind of bounce back and forth. He was a little inconsistent from like the Brooklyn series to the Atlanta series. But when Drew Holiday is on, he is absolutely the second option in this Bucks offense. And they need him, especially with Chris Middleton out, to be a lot more effective from the field. 5 of 22 is just not going to cut it. I actually thought Giannis played a very good game. I know he wasn't as efficient from the field as he was in Game 3, a little bit below 50%, but still a very good 34 points and some timely buckets down the stretch too. It's been really frustrating the past few games as a Bucks fan, watching the third quarter and watching the Bucks able to take control in that third quarter in both of these games, but in the fourth quarter starting to see it slip away. They are very lucky that they ended up winning that Game 3, obviously coming down to the last possession. Now looking back in a 2-2 series tie and being able to also get Game 1 on the road from Boston, I mean, I think Milwaukee's lucky to be in this series, and heading back to Boston for Game 5 is going to be really interesting. I would still lean towards the Bucks winning this game because I just think they're going to have revenge on their mind, and I really think Drew Holiday is going to step up because he can't have another game like last night. It's just not possible. Drew knows how much he means to this team right now with Chris Middleton out, their second leading scorer, so he knows he's going to have to step up his game, and I think that if he does do that and you still get some pretty solid performances off the bench from guys like Connaughton and Grayson Allen, then we're going to see that work out for the Bucks. But Boston's a tough crowd. I mean, I think that when you're thinking about the best home court advantages in the league, Boston is definitely up there because these fans are absolutely insane. We've matched up with Boston in the playoffs 3 times in the last 5 seasons, so we're starting to get really familiar with that fan base, and it gets really nasty. It gets really personal, like, you know, just the discussions on social media. And obviously everything happening with Giannis and Al Horford last night has been a hot topic of discussion. I'm here to say I don't think that should have been a tech on Giannis. I mean, if LeBron James or Kevin Durant did that, if they stared someone down after a big dunk, are they going to get a technical foul? I don't know why Giannis, as a reigning NBA champion and Finals MVP, doesn't get the treatment from the refs that I think a lot of the other big stars do. But that's besides the point. I mean, does Giannis need to stare him down? No, but I think that, you know, in the playoffs, emotions are running high, and you get a big dunk like that over Al Horford, who's a pretty well-renowned defender, you're going to say, hey, what's up? And I don't think that Al took that well, which is strange because Al throws a lot of elbows, you guys. I mean, when you're watching Al Horford play defense, I mean, don't get me wrong, he's a great defender, but I see a lot of elbows that he kind of gets away with. So for him to take that so personally was a little strange to me, but to his credit, he played absolutely fantastic after that point. You could tell that that really fired him up because he was the difference down the stretch. So that's going to be really interesting to see how that kind of renewed rivalry between Horford and Giannis, who have matched up in the playoffs before, how that's going to kind of feed into game 5 and if we're going to see that energy. I'm still taking the Bucks in this series, but this was a tough one to lose, especially at home and especially in such a winnable game going into the fourth quarter with the lead. They have to be better down the stretch. Drew Holiday has to show up, and one more guy that definitely has to show up in this series is Bobby Portis. He was so good in that Bulls series and obviously all of last year throughout the playoffs. Bobby Portis was the difference maker a lot of times. He didn't get that many minutes in the Brooklyn series, if you remember, but then he came back so strong against Atlanta and then against Phoenix in the finals. We need that Bobby Portis again because he has not been the same in this series. I also think Grayson Allen could do a little bit more. I mean, he hit a few shots last night that were timely buckets at least, but we saw him be such a difference maker against the Bulls. I know the Bulls are a very different roster than Boston when you're just talking about how they play defense, but I really need to see more out of Grayson Allen going into game 5 because they just need to put up some more points, and it can't be all on Giannis's shoulders because the way that Giannis plays, he's going to overexhaust himself. And if we really want to get back to the finals, we need him to kind of conserve his energy over the next few months. So really interesting game 5 tomorrow. I think all eyes in the NBA are going to be on this matchup because say what you want about Philly and the renewed energy after Embiid has come back, but I still think the winner of this Boston and Milwaukee series is going to be the Eastern Conference champion. I think they will win that next series, whether Miami comes back and wins against Philly or whether Philly is able to continue this momentum. I'm still taking Boston or Milwaukee, the winner of that series. So game 5 tomorrow night in Boston is going to be the game to watch in my opinion. And I'm really, really hoping that the Bucks, especially down the stretch, can play more solid. And if they get a lead, just don't get too comfortable because you know Boston's always going to be gunning for it. They even came back a little bit in that game 1, but I think the Bucks did a good job of kind of just holding them off at every time that they were able to make a push. So that's going to be something to follow. I think it's a must-win game for the Bucks because even though Game 6 will be back in Milwaukee, they don't want to go in this position where they have to win 2 in a row and then have that Game 7 in Boston. I don't like the idea of a Game 7 in Boston. You got to win this one. You got to win Game 5. So that's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. All right, let's move over to the Western Conference where we have the only series right now that is not tied. Golden State was able to take a 3-1 lead last night in a game where I thought Memphis had this game. This was so disappointing for Memphis, especially with Ja Morant not playing. It looked like they were going to be able to grab that game and tie the series up going back to Memphis for Game 5. And who knows, at this point, Ja's availability is still kind of up in the air. But if he would be able to come back for that Game 5 and it was tied 2-2, I think Memphis has all the momentum at that point. They played really solid. They played great defense against the Warriors. I think Curry wasn't really able to get going until later on in the game. And I just thought that they had a great game plan around how they were trying to play that game. They kind of muddied it up a little bit. It was a little bit of an ugly game for a little bit, but that lended itself well to how Desmond Bane and Kyle Anderson and Jaren Jackson and all these guys play. I really thought they had it. It's unfortunate, especially for Memphis fans out there. I do feel for them. That's a tough loss, especially being in San Francisco. I think it's pretty much over at this point. I did take the Warriors in 5 in my last video, so I think that prediction is looking pretty good at this point. I do think that the Warriors take Game 5 in Memphis, but Memphis is a fun team to watch, and the only reason I'm really kind of disappointed that they didn't win that game last night, I don't really have a dog in the fight, but I was really hoping that we'd see more of this series because Memphis has been so fun to watch, the way that they play with such high energy, and really hoping that Ja Morant's able to come back at some point, but really not sure about that. It's really unfortunate the timing of that injury, and I do feel bad for Ja. But like I said in that last video, I think the Memphis Grizzlies season is probably over at this point, but they are the team to watch in the Western Conference next year, especially if they're maybe able to land a free agent that comes over to join this really, really talented and young roster. I definitely think that they're just getting started in their journey to becoming one of the better teams in the Western Conference. But it's still about the Golden State Warriors right now, with Klay Thompson back from injury, Steph Curry playing very, very well, Draymond Green playing great on both ends, and this just immersion of Jordan Poole as a real offensive threat. It's gotten to the point where it's like, okay, we knew that Wiggins was kind of going to be that guy that, even though he's in a much lesser role than he was at Minnesota, we know how dangerous he can be on the offensive end, and that's a scary thing for the Warriors to have in their back pocket. But we forgot about Jordan Poole, because Jordan Poole has been a difference maker for them in the playoffs so far. And I'd be scared to play the Warriors right now. If they do end up making the finals against hopefully the Bucks, but at this point, who knows? It would be such an entertaining series to see that play out. I think most people left the Warriors for dead after Klay Thompson's injury. They saw that Steph couldn't really do it by himself. He needed those partners in crime by him. Obviously, Draymond has been off and on the past few seasons. You know, it's just been, we've kind of forgot how good they were. And obviously, when they had Kevin Durant, that was a completely different story. But if you remember, Kevin Durant didn't get there until after the 73-9 season. So they had really, really solid teams without Kevin Durant there, and it looks like they have another one. I expect them to close this series out, and whoever they play in that Western Conference Finals, whether it ends up being Dallas or Phoenix, it's going to be a very entertaining series. So before we close this out, let's talk about Dallas and Phoenix, because this is probably one of the more shocking developments to me. I expected Phoenix to win this series, possibly in 5 games. I didn't really expect them to have much trouble with Dallas, but Dallas is playing very, very well, and I like the style that Jason Kidd has going both on offense and defense. I think Spencer Dinwiddie has been a difference maker. You see that, you know, when all the attention is on Luka, they have other guys that can deliver, and Spencer Dinwiddie is one of them for sure. Jalen Brunson has been absolutely fantastic. We talked about that in the last video. Also, Dorian Finney-Smith has been a very, very dangerous offensive weapon, especially with that corner 3 that he's usually got open if Luka drives. Watch out for Dallas. I'm not giving up on Dallas on this series after the convincing way that they won that Game 4. And Game 5 back in Phoenix, obviously, when we're talking about great home crowds, Phoenix is definitely up there. That's going to be a tough game for Dallas on the road. But I'm not giving up on them on this series, and I really hope this series goes 7. I actually expect this series to go 7 at this point. I think Phoenix takes Game 5 tonight, and then we'll see Game 6 back in Dallas, where Dallas takes that. I'm really hoping to see a Game 7 in this series. So that's where we are right now. Very exciting series, pretty much across the board. I think really the only one that's over at this point is the Golden State series. I think Golden State has that in the bag. But besides that, they're all tied, and they all could really go either way. So that's so fun to watch. I mean, that's what you want to see in the playoffs. That's what you want to see even in the second round, where you're not really sure who's going to be in the finals at this point. It could be so many different teams. So a lot of talent still left, and for the most part, people are healthy. I know Ja's out. Chris Middleton for us is out. That's been a big, big injury. But for the most part, you're seeing pretty healthy rosters out there, and it's lending itself to very good basketball. So tonight, I'm going with the Sixers over the Heat. I think Philly takes control of this series, and I actually think they win it in 6. I think they have all the momentum. Embiid is back. He's fired up. You know, we talked a lot about how the Miami defense is going to go after him with his injured hand, and then obviously the mask that he has to wear. We're not sure how that affects his vision, but I think the last 2 games he's proved that he's still the Joel Embiid that we know, and he's able to have that massive impact on a game. So I'm really starting to lean towards Philly in this series. I've kind of flipped that around, because at first I had Miami in 5, but I'm changing my mind. I think either Philly in 6 or 7 at this point, and I expect them to win the game tonight. As for Dallas and Phoenix, I expect Phoenix to win, although I expect Dallas to give them a very tough game. They have had no answer for Luka Doncic for the most part. He has been absolutely torching this Phoenix Suns defense, and if he's able to keep that up, and if you have a couple more solid performances from guys like Dinwiddie and Jalen Brunson, Dorian Finney-Smith, maybe even Dwight Powell in the post, then you're going to see this be a pretty close game. But I just think that Chris Paul and company, they're going to be too much. This is one of the most solid rosters in the NBA, with Mikal Bridges, DeAndre Ayton, and obviously one of the most talented offensive players in our league, Devin Booker. So I'm taking Phoenix to win that game tonight and go up 3-2 against the Dallas Mavericks, and then I am taking Philly on the road to steal a game. I think they've taken all the momentum from Miami, and I expect them to win this series. Let's see how it goes from here, and I'll be back with more discussion later on this week. Go Bucks, we need that Game 5 tomorrow night.